Betrayed by best friend, I left. 2 days later, she took her own life. The mainspring fit perfectly under my magnifying glass at 2 a.m. After 37 years repairing watches, I still felt that small thrill when the antique Patek Philippe movement came back to life. My workshop, converted barn behind our Victorian house in Burlington, was my sanctuary. She used to joke that I spent more time with deceased Swiss mechanisms than with living people. She wasn't wrong. I'd been restoring that 1947 perpetual calendar for 3 months. The client, an investment fund guy from Boston, didn't care about the craft. He just wanted to resell it at auction. But I cared. Every jewel, every pivot, every microscopic adjustment mattered. That's who I was. Vans, the guy who repaired his own time while the world spun around him. Helen understood that about me, or at least I believe she did. We'd been married for 12 years. We met at an estate auction where she was sketching botanical engravings from a deceased woman's collection. She had ink under her nails and wore her grandmother's sweater like armor against the world. I was there for a lot of pocket watches. We competed for an antique magnifying glass. She won. I invited her to dinner. Our house told our story better than any words. Every restored window, every sanded floor, we did it all together. Helen's studio occupied the entire 3rd floor with north-facing windows that bathed her botanical illustrations in perfect light. My workshop was out back, close enough to have lunch together, but far enough to have our own space. We built something real there, something that mattered. Lately, Helen had been different, revitalized in a way I hadn't seen since her first exhibition. She'd reconnected with Drew, a colleague from Art University. He'd become a famous storm chaser with a show on the Weather Channel. They were collaborating on a project about recovery of storm-damaged flora. It made sense, I suppose. Helen always loved documenting nature's resilience. The meetings started monthly and weekly, and it was, I'm going for coffee with Drew to discuss the typhoon photos. Always during my workshop hours. Always when I was immersed in a restoration. At night, the watch balance finally stabilized. Perfect amplitude. I set the piece aside to observe it overnight and stretched my back after 6 hours hunched over the workbench. Inside the house, only Helen's reading light on the floor above broke the darkness. Her cell phone was vibrating on the kitchen counter. She'd left it charging again. I ignored it, but it kept vibrating. Once, twice, 3 times. It was 2:17 a.m. Who sends so many messages at that hour? I picked up the phone to silence it. On the preview screen, Drew's name and the words, "Can't stop thinking about you." My hand stayed steady. Watchmaker's hands. I unlocked the phone. The password was still our anniversary date. The messages went back for months. I escaped from everything. I need you like I need storms. Telvina is at another conference. Fairmont, the usual room. God, Helen, the way you looked at me today. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one we restored together, removing 7 layers of paint. Every message, every photo, the hotel confirmations hidden in a folder called Sketch References, the credit card statements I'd never checked because I trusted her. For months of lies cataloged like herbarium specimens. I didn't tremble, didn't shout. I took screenshots of everything, sent them to my email, deleted the sent message. Watchmaker's precision, every movement calculated. If you're finding this story as shocking as I did, hit that subscribe button and leave a like. And in the comments, tell me, would you have confronted them immediately or done what I did? Let me know below. The withdrawals from our joint account totaled $8,000. Art materials, studio repairs, frames. Everything coincided with Drew's messages about their encounters. I climbed the stairs, those we rescued from a demolition in Montpelier, and stood watching her sleep. Her botanical illustration of storm-damaged orchids was half finished on the desk. Drew's inspiration, apparently. My wedding ring came off without a sound. After 20 years without removing it, it slid off like nothing. I placed it on the drawing, right in the center of one of the painted flowers. The suitcase packed itself like a reflex from years of traveling to antique auctions. Essential tools, clothes, documents. I left the house key, but took the workshop keys. They were mine before her. They'd remain mine after. The truck started smoothly in the cold Vermont night. As I reversed, I saw her phone light up through the kitchen window. Even from the car, I could read Drew's message preview. Can't wait to hold you tomorrow at the Fairmont. Told Etelvina, I'm chasing storms in Kansas. I drove into the darkness, leaving 12 years behind without looking back. My brother Paul's cabin was 60 kilometers away in the New Hampshire woods with no cell signal unless you climbed to the ridge behind the property. Perfect for disappearing while deciding my next step. The first day, I repaired 3 watch mechanisms I'd brought from the workshop. Kept my hands busy while my mind tried to process 12 years of deception. The second day, I climbed to the ridge to check messages. 17 missed calls from Helen, 12 messages going from confusion to panic to rage. I deleted them all without reading and started back down the trail. At 7:14 p.m., an unknown unknown Vermont number. I almost ignored it. Mr. Brennan speaking. This is Officer Diana Morick from Burlington. There's been an incident with your wife. You need to come immediately to Fletcher Allen Medical Center. The drive back was on autopilot. No thoughts, just movement. The speedometer hit 140 on Route 89 and stayed there. Helen passed away at 8:43 p.m., 12 minutes before I arrived at the hospital. Overdose. Prescribed sedatives mixed with alcohol. The empty bottles were lined up on the kitchen table like one of her botanical compositions. Precise, deliberate, final. Officer Morse handed me her phone from inside an evidence bag. She had tried calling someone named Drew Tinson 37 times after taking the pills. He never answered. Her last message to him said, "He knows everything." "Do you know what that means?" the officer asked. I stared at the phone. Drew is an old friend from Art University. They were working together on a project. She wrote that down. We'll need to speak with him. And Mr. Brennan, I'm very sorry for your loss. The funeral was organized quickly. Cash always speeds things up. 3 days later, I was at Brennan Funeral Home shaking hands with people who thought they knew us. Helen's colleagues whispered about how I'd been the dedicated husband, about how perfect we seemed together. Drew arrived at 2 o'clock with his wife, Etelvina. He wore a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Etelvina, in simple black, looked exhausted. They signed the condolence book, and Drew approached me with rehearsed sympathy. "Vans, I'm so sorry. Helen was special, a true artist." He extended his hand. I looked at it and at his wrist. A brand new Rolex Submariner, the same model Helen had asked me about 3 months earlier. "Just curious about the mechanism," she'd said. I shook his hand. Firm, brief. "Thanks for coming." Etelvina touched my arm. Drew is devastated. They were working so closely on that storm project. He's been traveling all the time to meteorology conferences. Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. She paused. "Though I suppose that doesn't matter now." "Meteorology conferences," I repeated. "Yes, every few weeks," she confirmed. "Sometimes even more. Storm season has been especially intense." Drew's jaw tensed almost imperceptibly. "Etelvina, we should leave Vans alone so he can say goodbye." They headed to the viewing room. I watched them walk away. Drew's trips, mentioned by Etelvina, matched perfectly with Helen's client consultations. After the funeral, I decided to properly review our finances. The $8,000 I'd found was just the beginning. Our joint savings, $47,000 saved to expand the workshop, had disappeared, transferred in parts over 4 months to accounts I didn't recognize. Helen left a letter. Not exactly a goodbye note, but a kind of explanation. 5 lines written on the botanical patterned paper she adored. "I'm so sorry for the pain I caused. Drew promised me things that weren't real. The money is gone. The shame is mine. You deserve more than the ruins I left. Please don't look for answers. They don't exist." But I'd already rebuilt shattered watches worth fortunes. I'd already assembled entire mechanisms from boxes full of loose parts. I don't accept that answers don't exist. I contacted Race Russo, a private investigator recommended by my lawyer, ex-FBI agent specializing in financial crimes. We met at a restaurant on Church Street. "I want to know everything about Drew Tinson." I told him every detail, every transaction, every lie. He analyzed the material I'd gathered. "This isn't just a case, Mr. Brennan. Sometimes a case is just a case. My wife is dead. She emptied our accounts. Drew wears a $40,000 watch, and his wife thinks he was chasing storms while sleeping with my wife. This isn't just a case." Race nodded slowly. "Give me 48 hours. 2 days later, the phone rang at 6 a.m. "Vans, it's Race. Drew Tinson isn't who you think. This goes deeper than your wife. Meet me at the workshop," I said. "Bring everything." He arrived carrying 2 file boxes and a laptop. We spread the contents on my workbench between movement holders and chronocomparators. Financial records, photographs, court documents. Drew Tinson's real life dissected like watch parts waiting for assembly. "Your wife wasn't the first," Race began. "I found 3 others in the last 6 years." He pushed a photo across the bench. "Monica Rivers, ceramicist from Saul. Successful studio, married, 2 children. Met Drew at an art fair where he was promoting his storm photography. 4-month affair. In the end, she lost the studio, marriage, and $60,000. Another photo. Benton Shun, photographer from Woodstock. Drew convinced her to invest in a joint storm documentation project. She mortgaged her house for it. When she discovered he was recording their encounters, she attempted to take her own life. Still goes to therapy 3 years later. The third photo chilled my blood. Sydney Larson, textile artist. She looked identical to Helen. Same delicate features, same uncertain smile. Sydney disappeared, Race said quietly. The family filed a missing person report 2 years ago. Last time she was seen with Drew at a hotel in Albany. The case went cold. He chooses artists, Vans. Specifically married female artists in career transition. Your wife had just lost that museum contract, right? Race asked. I nodded. Helen's biggest project had fallen apart 2 months before Drew reappeared. That's his entry point, Race concluded. He appears when they're vulnerable. Promises collaboration, creative partnership. Then comes the love bombing. Constant attention, expensive gifts, speeches about destiny and connection. When they're hooked, the financial manipulation starts. Race opened the laptop showing bank records. He creates shell companies for fake projects, he explained. Stormy Productions. That's where your money went. Before that, he had Tempest Creative, Portions, all empty shells drained within months. How much total from all victims? victims? I asked. Around $230,000 traceable, he responded. But here's what's interesting. Drew's lifestyle costs about $300,000 a year. His Weather Channel show pays him $70,000. His wife, Etelvina, comes from a wealthy family, but the prenup protected her completely after his gambling addiction came to light in 2018. So he hunts professionally, Race concluded. In Vans, there's more. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket. Drew keeps trophies. A cloud account he thought was secure. Videos, photos, conversation recordings. Your wife didn't know she was being recorded. My hands closed into fists. Watchmakers' hands aren't made for fists. There's a pattern in the storm-chasing timeline, Race continued. Every conference coincides with victim encounters. He literally built his career destroying these women. What about the police? I asked. Monica never reported it. Too much shame. Benton attempted self-harm, which made her testimony inconsistent. Sydney's case has no body, no evidence of crime. And Helen, he paused. Officially, it's documented as self-harm. On paper, Drew is clean. I studied the timeline Race had assembled for women in 6 years. Calculated intervals. Professional execution. He was escalating. I noticed the intervals between victims decreasing and the amounts increasing. Helen had been his most lucrative hit. I picked up Sydney's photo again. You say she disappeared 2 years ago? Yes. Last seen leaving the Hampton in Albany. The receptionist remembered Drew because he complained twice about the room. Sydney's car was found in a rest stop parking lot near the Vermont border. Drew was chasing storms in Kansas that week, I murmured. Helen showed me his footage with location and timestamps. Race leaned forward. How good are you with video metadata? I restore mechanical watches, not digital files, but I understand precision, time, synchronization. I know what you're talking about. He opened the storm-chasing video from the week Sydney disappeared. Look at the shadows in this tornado footage, he said. The angle. I watched carefully. The shadow angles were wrong for the indicated time. 3 hours off. He falsified the date stamps. Exactly. He recorded this footage days earlier. He records content in advance to create alibis. That proves deception, not murder. No, Race replied, but it's enough to reopen Sydney's case. Vans, I found the apartment. What apartment? Drew rented a property in Helen's name. Paid 6 months up front with her credit. The contract was signed 2 weeks before she passed away. My workshop fell silent. Only the ticking of a dozen restored watches. Race handed me another flash drive. The Fairmont recordings. He filmed everything. Your wife didn't know. I didn't watch the videos. Not out of respect for Helen. Respect died with the marriage. But because I needed clarity, not hatred. Instead, I cataloged everything as evidence. Dates, places, duration. Drew had recorded 17 encounters over 4 months. Meticulous documentation of his conquests. The forensic accountant I hired, Alana Vos, found more than Race. Your wife's name is on 3 credit cards you didn't know about, she explained, spreading statements across my bench. Total debt, $31,000. All cash advances, withdrawn days after opening them. And where did the money go? I asked. Same shell company accounts, then transferred offshore. But there's something curious. Drew doesn't just steal, he launders gambling debts using the victim's accounts. Makes it look like they're the gamblers, in case anyone investigates. I organized everything into packages, flash drives, financial records, statements from Monica and Benton, both eager to finally see Drew face consequences. Each package directed to the correct recipient. The National Weather Service received proof that Drew was falsifying storm recordings to create alibis. The Storm Chasers Association received evidence that he was using professional trips to commit adultery. His publisher received proof that the book he was about to launch contained fabricated storm encounters. At first, I visited Etelvina. She lived in the couple's converted farmhouse while Drew stayed in hotels for work. We sat in her kitchen, nothing like the one Helen and I had restored. This one was cold marble and sharp angles. I know about the infidelities, Etelvina said before I spoke. I've known for years. I stay because of the prenup. If I leave, I get nothing. If he leaves, I get everything. She smiled, a smile without warmth. Drew is too smart to ask for divorce and too stupid to stop hunting. I placed the flash drive on the marble counter. Your husband recorded everything, including financial fraud that could make you a legal accomplice. Her posture broke slightly. I maintained separate finances. Not enough. Your name is on the Stormy Productions documents. Secondary signature. Etelvina paled. I signed those papers to help with tax returns. He made you an accomplice, I replied. But you can fix it. She stared at the flash drive. What do you need? Everything. Financial records, correspondence, anything Drew is hiding. Etelvina disappeared upstairs and returned minutes later with a suitcase. Inside, file backups, passwords, offshore account numbers, everything he thought she didn't know. There were 8 years of records with more victims, more money, more recordings. Why now? I asked. Because Helen is gone, she responded. The others only lost money. Your wife lost everything. The next day, I filed criminal charges. Fraud, theft, coercive manipulation, revenge recording. 17 charges total. Detective Angela Santos, financial crimes specialist with 15 years of experience, reviewed all the documentation. This is exhaustive, she said. But cases like this are difficult to prosecute. Victims rarely testify. Monica and Benton will testify, I guaranteed. And Sydney Larson. Santos stopped to read the section about the missing woman in Albany. Drew's records are false. He was was there when she disappeared. That's homicide jurisdiction. Then involve them, I responded. This predator has been operating for almost a decade. Within a week, Drew's world collapsed in real time. The Weather Channel suspended him during the investigation. The Storm Chasers Association revoked his credentials. The publisher canceled the book. First, local news. Famous storm chaser under investigation for fraud. Then national media. Drew's face next to photos of his victims, including Helen. I was in the workshop when the phone rang. Unknown number. Vans. Drew's voice, stripped of its usual confidence. We need to talk. No, we don't. You don't know what you started. I have things about her that will destroy her memory. Like the recordings you made without consent. I asked. Those are already evidence. Not those. His voice turned sharp. Other things. Things she told me about you, about your family, about that inherited watch collection that might not be exactly legal. My stomach clenched. My grandfather's collection, confiscated from a German officer in 1945, brought home without documentation. Helen knew the story. Are you threatening me with pillow talk? I asked. I'm offering you a solution. Drop the charges. I disappear. Keep pushing. Helen becomes the villain in every story I tell. The unstable artist who stalked me, stole from her husband to finance her own obsession. I have enough messages to make it convincing. Try it, I responded. You don't think I would? I know you would. That's why I'm recording this call. Silence. See you in court, Drew. His threats evaporated when his lawyer heard the recording. Blackmailing a witness tends to complicate defense strategies. When the trial started, 3 months later, Drew had already changed lawyers 4 times. Each one quit upon discovering new evidence the client tried to hide. The courtroom was smaller than I imagined. Burlington Superior Court. Judge Francis Kell presiding. Drew sat at the defense table in a suit cheaper than usual. Telvina had frozen his accounts during the divorce proceedings. Monica testified first. Calm, methodical, devastating. She described Drew's pattern. The initial charm, the promises of partnership, financial requests that became demands. She presented receipts, messages, bank statements. Her voice didn't tremble even when recounting her attempted self-destruction after losing everything. Then came next. She brought printed screenshots of Drew's messages, highlighting his manipulation tactics. He would say, if you really believe in our connection, invest in our future. He made me feel small for doubting, like questioning his plans was betraying the love he claimed to feel. The forensic accountant presented a flowchart that looked like an electronic circuit. Money flowing from victims, passing through shell companies, ending in offshore accounts, returning later to pay Drew's debts. Clean, precise, irrefutable. Then it was my turn. State your name for the record. Vans Brennan, master watchmaker, widower. Prosecutor Jeanette Rongo guided me through the events. The discovery of the betrayal, financial theft, hiring the investigators. I kept answers short, actual, emotionless, just mechanics. What was your wife's mental state in her final days? I wasn't there. I'd left after discovering the affair. She tried to contact me. 17 calls, 12 messages. I didn't respond. Do you blame yourself for her passing? Drew's lawyer objected. Objection sustained. The judge responded. Jeanette presented the flash drives. These recordings were found in the defendant's cloud. Your wife consented to being recorded? No. How can you be sure? Because she valued privacy above everything. She wouldn't even let me photograph her illustrations before they were finished. She would never have consented to that. The recordings weren't shown to the public. The judge reviewed them in private session. When she returned, her gaze could freeze bourbon. Drew testified on the 3rd day. His story changed with each question. The women had given him money. No, they'd invested in legitimate businesses. Or maybe they'd asked him to manage their finances. Each contradiction generated 2 new ones. Mr. Tinson, Jeanette asked, can you explain why you pre-recorded storm footage and falsified dates? I never. We have metadata analysis proving the video used as an alibi for Sydney Larson's disappearance was filmed 3 days earlier. Drew's composure broke. Sydney was disturbed. She talked all the time about disappearing. And yet, you never mentioned it to police when she went missing. I didn't think, or didn't want them investigating your relationship. His lawyer objected repeatedly, all rejected. Character witnesses destroyed what remained of Drew's credibility. The gambling addiction, 2019 tax fraud, 2017 restraining order. Pattern after pattern emerging like gears in a damaged mechanism. Telvina testified next for the prosecution. She got immunity in exchange for full cooperation, handing over Drew's hidden account books, secret recordings, everything. She revealed he'd practiced his manipulation tactics on her first before starting to hunt other women. He called it emotional architecture, Telvina said, building someone up just to control how that person crumbles. The jury deliberated 3 hours, guilty on all charges. Drew stood upon hearing the verdict. The former storm chaser finally stripped of all arrogance. Judge Kell set sentencing for the following week. As officers approached to take him away, Drew exploded. There's another account, he shouted across the courtroom. One Helen created alone. Check Geneva Rhodes. She knew everything. Geneva Rhodes. She documented everything. All the women, all the money. She was building her own case. The judge demanded order. Drew was dragged out, still shouting about Geneva Rhodes and Helen's secret investigation. After the session, Jeanette Rongo approached me. Do you know anything about this Geneva Rhodes? I shook my head, but a chill ran through my chest. Helen had mentioned Geneva once, the place where her grandmother was born. She said she might might name a botanical series with that title. We're going to investigate, Jeanette said. Sometimes defendants make up anything to create confusion. But that night, I searched Helen's studio for the first time since her passing. The place remained exactly as she left it. Botanical illustrations at different stages, grandma's magnifying glass on the table, the ink-stained sweater hanging from the chair. I started with the obvious places: drawers, files, folders. Nothing about Geneva Rhodes. Then I remembered Helen's habit, hiding valuable sketches between canvases. In the third stack from the window, I found a manila envelope marked Geneva Series Preliminaries. Inside, bank documents for Geneva Rhodes LLC, created 5 weeks before her passing. Taped to it, a safe deposit box key and a note in Helen's handwriting. Vans will understand. Precision requires documentation. The bank opened at 9. The box contained 3 flash drives, a leather journal, and a letter addressed to me. Vans, if you're reading this, you found what Drew tried so hard to hide. I discovered his pattern 6 weeks ago. I found a ceramic piece at an estate auction. She signed it as single with a phrase: "Never trust storms that promise calm." I looked her up. Monica told me everything, and she put me in contact with Etten. We found evidence of 5 more women Drew destroyed. I've been documenting everything in this box: financial records, recordings where Drew admits his methods, correspondence with victims. I started the case knowing who he was. I let him think he was seducing me while I gathered evidence. Every encounter, every transfer, every lie, all recorded here. I planned to expose him once I had enough. But I got lost, Vans. Manipulation works even when you know what's happening. When I realized I'd fallen into my own trap, he already had the recordings, the debts, the control. I saw no way out that wouldn't destroy you too. I'm not strong enough to face what comes after. But you are. You fix broken things. Fix this. The third flash drive contains something else. Evidence about Sydney Larson. Drew got intoxicated one night and told me she threatened to expose him. He said he took care of the problem. Said she was feeding the fish in Lake Champlain. I recorded everything. Forgive me for the lies. Not for him. Never for him. For trying to protect you fighting alone. Can you believe what Helen did? She was building a case the whole time. If this story moved you, please share it and leave a like. What would you have done in my situation? Tell me in the comments. The journal contained meticulous notes, meeting schedules, financial transfers tracked to the last penny, Drew's confessions transcribed word for word. Helen had assembled a more complete case than the FBI itself. The recording about Sydney was crystal clear. Drew, intoxicated and bragging, describing how he convinced her to meet at the lake, how easy it was to make her disappear, how the storm that night erased everything. I delivered all the material to Detective Santos that same afternoon. Hours later, a homicide team initiated underwater searches in Lake Champlain. Near the coordinates Drew, drunk, revealed to Helen, they found Sydney's remains the next day. Drew's sentencing became a mere formality, overshadowed by the new murder charges. 8 years for fraud became life without parole. He accepted a deal to avoid the death penalty, finally admitting he ended Sydney's life when she threatened to expose him. The courtroom was full for the final hearing. Monica, Etten, and 3 other victims I didn't even know. Etelvina, now divorced and free, watched from the back row. Drew entered in chains. A storm chaser who had played God with so many women's lives couldn't even choose his own clothes anymore. The orange prison uniform never fit him as badly as the expensive suits he used to wear. During victim impact statements, I spoke last. You tried to destroy her. She sacrificed everything gathering evidence to protect others. You destroyed Sydney, destroyed Monica and Betten, stole more than money. You stole trust, security, futures. But she documented it all. She built the case that brought you down, even deceased. She won. Drew was let out silently. No threats, no manipulations. Just a broken man heading to a concrete cell. Reparation came gradually. Insurance investigations, asset seizures, liquidation of Drew's secret accounts. Monica received enough to rebuild her studio. Betten created a foundation supporting survivors of abuse. The other victims found their own paths to restart. I used Helen's life insurance and recovered assets to found the Helen Brennan Foundation, dedicated to supporting artists who are victims of financial abuse. The first scholarship went to a painter whose husband had emptied her accounts. The second to a sculptor fleeing a controlling partner. 6 months later, I returned to Helen's grave. I brought an orchid, one of those storm-damaged ones she had painted. I placed it in front of the headstone, and I left there the watch I'd been making. A unique piece, her ashes sealed under the crystal behind the dial. Time frozen at 8:43. You started this, I murmured to the stone. I finished it. Now rest. My phone vibrated. Local news. Drew Tinson attacked in prison by an inmate whose sister was going to be his 7th victim. I deleted the alert and returned to my workshop. 17 mechanisms were waiting for restoration. Time doesn't stop for anyone. Not for grief, not for revenge, not for justice. But sometimes, for a brief instant, it slows down enough for the broken pieces to realign. The workshop door closed behind me. The mainspring fit perfectly under my magnifying glass. Come to work.